Hey guys, Augustino here. The largest expense as a landlord is tenant turnover. So it's much easier and a lot less cheaper, a lot less money to keep your good tenants happy than to turn over your units. It's going to be extremely important to keep your tenants in your property with this upcoming recession. So let's talk about how important that is to keep your tenants happy during this downturn and keep them in the property. So these rules apply largely to bigger properties, but it also is really relevant to smaller properties as well. So, like I said, resident retention is going to be absolutely critical. So people are going to move in search of lower cost rents because of the increases that we're seeing in terms of inflation. Right? You got fuel, food, rents going up, everything's going up. These tenants are going to look to combine households and maybe get a roommate, maybe move in with someone else. So keeping your tenants happy and in your property is going to become absolutely critical. Now, the baseline really starts with making sure that the properties look good, they're well maintained. But it also means putting a focus on the customer experience. I know it sounds cheesy, but you know what? It's a business, guys. This is a business, and keeping an eye on your customer experience is going to be very, very important. So people will consider moving in with family and friends to split those bills, again, to cover the cost of inflation. So the thing is, though, is that you're going to want to create an experience that's so good, they're going to opt to stick around. So here are my 5 rules that you can use to hang on to your tenants, okay? So number 1, reviews and follow-up. Now this mainly applies to larger property owners, but you're gonna have to keep an eye on your Yelp and your Google reviews. If your reputation looks good, people won't complain. That's the thing. Generally, people will just live their lives and do what they do. However, if tenants are unhappy, they'll start complaining, and you need to know about it and address it first before you find out on a public forum. Right? So this means paying attention to your work order fulfillment. Make sure that the tenant gets a phone call after every maintenance call, right? So when the maintenance guy goes out there, looks at the unit, fixes it, whatever you have to fix, make sure you follow up with them to make sure the quality of the work is to their satisfaction, right? There are many owners that actually hire VAs, virtual assistants, to do the follow-up. Because they don't have the bandwidth or they don't have the time. So that's going to be a very critical thing, okay? But the important thing is to verify that everything is fine. Now, on smaller properties, you're going to make the calls yourself. Maybe you want to do it via text message, right? It's another option as well. But staying focused and keeping the tenant happy by staying on top of their requests is going to be very, very important. Stay in communication with them. Don't smother them. Never smother anybody, right? But stay in communication with them. Let them know that the lines of communication are open. If there's anything else they need, they can always contact you. Number 2, something I call lease blending and extending. And what that means is that maybe you're going to want to consider going for a longer lease, or perhaps like an 18, 20, or 24-month lease. So you can offer, like, say, a lower rent for each of those periods, and maybe knocking the rental down a little bit for each one to incentivize a longer term. So it's also a good idea to stagger the leases with your tenant pool so they're not all ending at the same time. So generally, rentals they slow down in October through February. That's usually like the time when there's not a whole lot of movement. So you're going to want to see if you can fill that gap by using some of those numbers I mentioned earlier, those odd number leases there that people see every day. It really depends on the market, though, right? If you can get away with such a thing, right? If tenants are really happy doing that, you can certainly do that. But I would also consider possibly, again, depending on your market, capping your rent temporarily. Holding the rent where it is for some period of time to make sure that you're still competitive. Okay, you want to still stay in that pocket where people are still wanting to live there, okay? Number 3, using technology. Now, people use their cell phones every day for everything. So the ability for people to apply for a unit, to make a payment, create maintenance tickets, all these things, it needs to be easy. It needs to be easy. And the cool thing about it is that now there's free platforms out there, especially for the smaller operators, to do all this, to manage all this. It's already out there. The point is, though, you're going to want to use technology to make the tenant experience that much easier. Generally, tenants don't want to talk to people, right? They want to just put a ticket in the system, make a payment in the system. They don't want to have to get in their car, drive somewhere to drop off rent or anything else like that. If they could do the whole thing on the phone, online, it makes everybody's life way easier, right? On our deals, we're now doing unit tours online, right? So they can a person can log in and go look at the unit on apartments.com or whatever, and they can get a look at the unit before they even step foot on the property, right? So it's great. Now, on smaller properties, taking great photos is going to be super, super important. And think about it like this for a second, all right? If a person has 2 ads, all right, to look at, all right, one has great photos, the other one has bad photos, they'll probably want to talk to the one that has the nice photos. You know, why? Well, because the person that has the nicer photos, they pay attention to the details. The other one probably does not, right? And that's important. It goes a long way, believe it or not. The competition is going to be there. If you're not good at taking photos, hire a photographer. It's not that expensive, and it's certainly way cheaper than holding on to a vacant unit, okay? Number 4, the community experience. Now, if you have a staff at your property and they really got to be happy doing their jobs. If not, you have another problem. That's a whole other video, right? But I can say that they have the first line of contact when a tenant goes into a leasing office. They need to look nice. They need to have a smile on their face. And if the tenant doesn't feel welcome, you know what? It's just one more reason for them to leave, right? Another big part of these larger properties especially is to build a community, right? They have to love their neighbors, or at least like them anyway, be tolerable. Meaning that by doing these biannual parties for the tenants on site, can go a long way. Maybe you could do like one of those cheese and wine sampler evenings, you know, that kind of thing. There's actually companies out there that'll sponsor or even come out and do those events for you. The cost is usually minimal, or if it's one of those wine companies that do subscription-based type scenarios, they would love to have a captive audience to sell their wine to that community of residents, right? But if not, you know what? You can foot the bill yourself. It's not going to be that expensive, and that gesture goes a real long way. But here's the thing, if there's people feel welcome and they make friends in the building, they're less likely to leave, because people they won't leave a community if they feel like they have friends there, right? They want to stick around. Gyms do the same sort of thing. They have these partner workouts to encourage people to get to know the community of people in the gym, okay? For smaller properties, you may opt to do a birthday or a holiday basket or something like that, or maybe even a gift card for your tenants too. But the thing is, though, before you do any of these things, make sure you know your audience. Don't give alcohol to people that don't drink. Don't give meat to vegetarians, right? Things like that. Put some thought into what you're going to do and how these gifts are put together, okay? And number 5, make asset management a priority. Today, now more than ever, asset management is going to be super, super, super important. So keep an eye on your KPIs, your key performance indicators, right? Things such as days late, delinquencies, occupancy, receivables, evictions, all these things should be tracked, okay? And look for trends. It's the trends that really tell you where things are going. If your days late starts increasing over time, you may have a problem, right? Pay attention to your numbers. You'll want to anticipate drops in your economic occupancy if, as people have a hard time paying, for instance, right? They may just move or room with someone else rather than even talk to you about it, right? So this is where you really have to understand where things are. Ultimately, know your break-even point. Like how much rent do you need to keep the asset alive? You know, you really got to know your numbers now. Again, now more than ever. Also, pay attention to your nearby competition. They will surely be fighting for the same pool of tenants. Okay, so compare how your prices are to theirs. How your amenities stack up to theirs, for instance. If you have a smaller property, you may not have all those amenities, but you need to compete maybe on price and location. You have to have something beneficial there that the other guys just don't have, right? So the point is that your competition can pick up your tenants if you're not on your game. So Having been through a few downturns myself, I've been through a lot of many recessions. Paying attention to asset management is one of those things that deals either thrive or they die. So it's super, super important to pay attention to this. Now, as things tighten up in the next 8 to 12 months, re-underwrite your assets to the current situation if you're doing a refi or something like that. Because ultimately you want to re-verify your pro forma, make sure it's still realistic with the new interest rates. If you are doing some sort of refinance, you may need to also hold on to the asset longer than you anticipated, and that might be okay. Just run with the numbers that you have with the appropriate exit cap, because again, things are starting to change a little bit too when it comes to valuations, and you have to make sure that even what the market is doing at that given point in terms of how popular the assets are, because it changes fairly often, could impact your overall return on the investment. So make sure you understand what the exit cap looks like, but always opt for the conservative side. Now, the one thing that many operators also did during the pandemic was to pause distributions to investors. Maybe you want to choose to do the same thing here if things get really, really, really bad. If you do, always let them know that you're conserving cash. Tell them what you're doing. Never just do it and then tell them later. Like, yeah, they're partners in the deal, so it's best you treat them that way, right? I know it's painful, but it's better than being underwater on a deal. You may also consider putting some major capital expense work on hold as well. But in both cases, you're looking to build a war chest of cash that can get you through 6 to 8 months of expense reserves. All right, so that's what you're looking for. If you don't have it today, you can also start shaving off a little bit of returns today, like starting now, to start building it up if you don't have it, right? So always communicate with your investor pool with what you're doing there. That's you have to do that, right? So those are my 5 tips. You can see the emphasis is on improving the tenant experience, but it's also about being smart about running the property. Again, keep in mind, this is still a business. And like any business, you really need to pay attention to the business itself, right? Certainly, this is not a passive experience. Despite what the gurus say, this is not passive. This is a very active type of business, all right? Anyway, look in the bio for any upcoming events we have. I got a lot of free ebooks up there as well. I update those links all the time. Also, check out the YouTube channel, okay? We have over 400 videos. If you like what you see, please throw some likes my way. It certainly helps us out, all right? Be bulletproof, guys. I'll talk to you soon.